Hey everybody, today I want to talk about the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band album. And I just listed this amazing UK pressing on my website, needlemeetsvinyl.com. And I cannot tell you how much work has gone into finding this exact pressing. And it is so wonderful. This is just the absolute best you will ever hear with the original stereo mix of Sgt. Pepper. Now, I'm going to be talking about a bunch of other pressings I have here. In fact, a total of 12 different pressings, including this one I'm holding right here. So, lots of Sgt. Pepper coming your way. First, I want to discuss the concept of Sgt. Pepper, of course, famously, there is a mono mix and a stereo mix. Now, the mono mix, of course, was a lot of care was put into that. All the Beatles had a lot of input in it, and George Martin and Geoff Emerick, they all spent a lot of time on the mono mix. And of course, famously, the stereo mix, they didn't really put as much time into as the mono mix. Now, this is the stereo mix, and I decided that for my website, I wanted to first tackle the stereo mix because I personally think the stereo mix has been given a bad rap over the years. While the mono mix has a lot of great things going on with it, I think the stereo mix is really cool and actually really adventurous and just a very fascinating mix, in my opinion. And to be perfectly honest with you, most of the world, meaning like the United States, North America, all that kind of stuff, really only had access to the stereo mix. Granted, of course, there were mono pressings in the United States, but I think a lot of people really got the stereo mix, especially people like my age who I'm in my mid-30s now, and you grew up with the CDs and all that kind of stuff. So the stereo mix was really what most people today are really aware of as far as Sgt. Pepper. So I really wanted to get an excellent sounding stereo pressing of this album on my website. Now, that's not to say that I'm going to totally gloss over the mono mix, because stay tuned, I'm going to have a mono pressing of Sgt. Pepper on my website in the near future. I'm working on it as we speak. But for today, let's talk about the stereo mix. And this particular pressing is from the mid-70s, in fact, 1976 to be exact. And it's on the Parlophone black and gray and white label. And the very special thing, by the way, this is an absolutely near mint condition, absolutely plays beautifully as far as condition goes. The great thing about this one is that it has HTM in the dead wax on both sides. And that is a huge game changer when it comes to these pressings for Sgt. Pepper. The clarity on this is unbelievable. You will hear things on this pressing that you can't even hear in the new Giles Martin remix that came out in 2017, which, by the way, I will be talking about. This is amazing. If you want to hear the original way that all four Beatles and George Martin and Geoff Emerick signed off on the stereo version of Sgt. Pepper, this is the way to hear it. It's got beautiful sound, and the number one thing that this pressing has that just blows everything else out of the water, it has fantastic bass on here. The bass is just otherworldly. So Sgt. Pepper at times has been kind of written about as though it didn't age well or whatever. And I have a theory on that. In 1987, when they released the CD versions of the Beatles albums for the first time, when Sgt. Pepper came out, it felt very sterile and kind of flat, and it totally lacked bass. And Sgt. Pepper without bass is just not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to have beefy bass, and this pressing has that beefy bass, and it makes this album absolutely perfect. And of course, Paul McCartney is at his peak as far as a bass player on the Sgt. Pepper album. So it's just a very important aspect to the sound to have excellent bass, and this pressing has it. Now, let's talk about why this pressing is the best, in my opinion. Now, I had two original UK stereo pressings of this album as well, and that I borrowed from friends, and they were very, very nice. But I'm about to say something that might upset some people. It might make you shake your head and say, how is that possible? But I'm just giving you my opinion. Based on those two pressings that I had, which were, by the way, both had different stamper numbers on them, this 1976 pressing sounded better to me than those original 67 UK pressings of the album. Now, that's a bold statement because obviously those original pressings are wonderful to have. They're very expensive, by the way, if you want to get anything above a VG Plus. They're insanely expensive and getting harder and harder to find as well. But as far as overall sonic clarity and just low-end power, this pressing, in my opinion, beats those out by just a little bit, I have to admit. They were very, very close, but it does beat it out. And to me, that's a very, very bold statement, but it's also the truth. And I think, obviously, if you own an original 67 pressing, it's something to be treasured because that is the original way it came out, how everyone heard it, and very, very cool if you have that in your collection. And if you want to go after one of those, by all means, if you want to put the money into it, you should definitely do it. But as far as sound quality goes and wanting the original stereo mix, in my opinion, in the best sound that you can get, this is the one. And if you want to pick this up, it's on my website, needlemeetsvinyl.com. It will go very quickly. The last Beatles album that I posted, I think it was the Help album, or was it Rubber Soul? Either one of those, which one it was. Within posting my video, it was sold within about 45 minutes. So it's gonna go quickly. So many of you out there are just insane Beatle fans, just like me, by the way. So I say insane in the most loving way. And you want to get your hands on the Beatles stuff as quick as possible, and I totally, totally get it. So if you want to pick this one up, go to the website, needlemeetsvinyl.com. It's on there. I did a whole write-up on there. You can check that out as well, and check this one out. But now let's talk about some other pressings here of Sgt. Pepper. Some of these are ones I bought specifically for the website. Some are just from my own personal collection. Now, this one is from my own personal collection, and this is a almost identical pressing to the one on the website. This has HTM in the dead wax, and it is a UK pressing from 1976, and this is my own personal copy, which I love, I cherish, and it's just a brilliant, brilliant listening experience. So a lot of people do ask me this question, by the way. They ask me, why are you selling these amazing Beatle pressings? Don't you want to have them for your own collection? And I always answer with, I do have them in my own collection, and this is proof right here. I have an identical copy here. So this is the website, and this is my own personal one. And of course, while every pressing has its own unique characteristics about it, these are very, very, very close to each other. So website, my own personal collection. So this is from 1976 UK stereo pressing. Now, let's talk about this one. Now, this is a French pressing on the EMI Odeon label. And this is a very poor sounding pressing of Sgt. Pepper, unfortunately. So if you ever are in the shops and you see this French pressing on the Apple label, while it's a very cool collectible, and that's why I have it, I'm keeping it for my own personal collection because I did buy this for the website, trying to figure out the best sounding one. It was a bit of a disappointment. It sounds a little bit flat to me, a little bit thin in the high end, and it's lacking low end as well. So very problematic when it comes to Sgt. Pepper. So this is the French pressing, and by the way, it has like a little barcode thing up here, or not barcode, but like a just code on there of some kind. Moving on, these are US pressings. Let's see, do I have any more? Oh, I do. Okay, so this is kind of an oddity. I think I've showed this before on my channel. This is a Russian pressing from the early 90s, I believe. And it sounds okay. It kind of sounds almost I think they got the master of this from the actual CD version that was released in 87, 88, and they just pressed it to vinyl. The cool thing about this, though, is the cover is different. Someone added a bunch of different extra people in there, and of course the bass drum is different. You can get a look at that. Just kind of cool to have. And it comes, by the way, with Revolver, so it's a double album. Very, very kind of an oddity when it comes to Sgt. Pepper, but worth owning nonetheless. And by the way, my friend Bert bought that for me, so thank you, Bert. Moving on, so maybe you're thinking, okay, well, what about the U.S. pressings of Sgt. Pepper? And the U.S. pressings of Sgt. Pepper, while they are very, very cool, let me actually grab an original U.S. stereo, which was right here. The U.S. pressing of Sgt. Pepper are very cool to own. Obviously, people in the U.S., that's how they first experienced Sgt. Pepper, so I'm sure it has a lot of personal connections for them. In fact, first time I heard Sgt. Pepper was my dad's U.S. stereo pressing of Sgt. Pepper, so it holds a special place for me as well. But when it comes to sound quality, it's very poor. It's very thin, is how I describe it, in the upper regions. It's lacking a lot of low end. In addition, and this is just a small thing, at the very end of Day of the Life, as I'm sure a lot of you know, after the final chord, there's a little like snippet of like backwards nonsense. Well, that's not on the US version. So that's a bit of a problem because it is, of course, on the UK pressings. And just in general, the US pressings they just fall a little flat for me when it comes to it. But they're definitely worth owning in your collection. And if you find one, you should pick it up because it's cool to have and it's obviously collectible. By the way, I don't think I've shown the gatefold yet. Sgt. Pepper has a fantastic gatefold. So this is a very early Capitol stereo pressing, which, by the way, has its original inner sleeve, which was designed by The Fool, which was an artistic group that the Beatles became friends with. So it's cool to have that. And it's on the Capitol Rainbow label, of course, as all of their pre-1968 albums in the US were on the Capitol Rainbow label. This is in not so great shape, as you can see, as it's coming apart here. But like I said, I have a special place in my heart for the US pressings of Sgt. Pepper, but if you're going for the superior audio quality, they're not all that great. And I have a bunch of different US pressings here of Sgt. Pepper. Let's go through some of these. I have two mono pressings of Sgt. Pepper, the US. This is a mono. And this, I believe, is also a mono. Yeah, this is also a mono. These are two mono US pressings of Sgt. Pepper. And same goes for the mono pressing, just lacking a little bit as far as the US version. Now, this one is a later pressing. This is let's see exactly what pressing this is. Okay, this is on the Capitol Purple label, and this is taken from a digital source. And it actually sounds pretty good. I got this, this was sealed when I got it. And it has, let me see if it has any distinguishable markings in the dead wax. Oh yeah, this is a Wally pressing. And it sounds very, very good. But, again, not as good as the UK pressing that I have on the website. This one is good, but it's sourced from the digital source, which is a bit of a problem for me. Although, that being said, there are some albums that are sourced from digital that were pressed to vinyl that are fantastic. So, just because this one doesn't happen to be that great doesn't mean that that's like a rule or something like that. So that is a US pressing. And then this is another US pressing, and I think this is also a Capitol Purple label. And I will try to get it out here. Yep, this is also a Capitol Purple label, but this is earlier. And this is a J. LeMay pressing. Now, this sounds excellent. This is a great sounding one. If you have to get a US pressing of Sgt. Pepper, I recommend this one highly. I've talked about this pressing before in an older video, I think from like at least 5 or 6 years ago. This one sounds really, really good. I believe this is a early 80s, maybe later 80s pressing of Sgt. Pepper, and it's one of the last ones they did in the US that's sourced from analog. It's not a digital source, and it sounds really, really good. Granted, the UK pressing that I have on the website is better, and obviously an original UK pressing is better as well. But this one, if you want to get a US pressing, is the way to go. And it says J. LeMay etched in the dead wax there. It says mastered by Capitol, and then it has J. LeMay. So a very, very cool pressing of this. Now, I don't have them anymore because I sold them back to some local shops in my town here. But I also had a Japanese pressing that was from, I think it was the late 60s, early 70s, might have been 69 or 71. I can't exactly remember. But the Japanese pressing was pretty good, I will say. But again, like a lot of those Japanese pressings, it had a bit of distortion going on, and it had distortion going on in the high end, which if you're going to have distortion, in my opinion, I'd prefer to have it in the low end because it's not quite as audible. In the high end, it's very problematic because you get that high-end kind of distortion sound, and it really ruins the music. That being said, it didn't have it going throughout the whole record, just certain points in the record, and it just wasn't all that great. Also had a German pressing of Sgt. Pepper, and I love a lot of the German pressings of the Beatles records. Sgt. Pepper, unfortunately, is not one of the good German ones. Had it on the blue Odeon label, and it was just underwhelming in every aspect. It sounded like it was taken from like a 3rd or 4th generation master tape. So it's just no good. So avoid the German and the Japanese pressings, in my opinion. Now, let's talk about a couple of the later, the more modern issues of Sgt. Pepper. This is the 2000, released in 2012, taken from the 09 digital remasters. Now, it's the same mix as this one that's on the website from the original UK stereo mix. Same mix, but it's just been remastered. Now, I will say, this remastered one, you can get this anywhere still. It's available. I've seen this at Barnes & Noble. I've actually seen this at Target. I've seen it all over. So this is still readily available. And if this is a Sgt. Pepper that you own, it's a very, very good one, I have to say. I think it's a very good pressing. They did a good job on this. Now, how does it compare to the one I have on the website? There's a big, big difference, and it has to do with the dynamics of the actual sound. So, the remaster, while it's good, in my opinion, it's not quite as true as far as the sound goes as this UK pressing from the mid-70s. Now, what I mean by that is they've boosted the bass on this remaster, but the boosted bass, in my opinion, is not as rich and not as it doesn't have that analog magic like this original pressing does. And that's a big, big problem because at times on this 09 remaster, the bass can be a little bit too much for me and a little inauthentic. That being said, it's in no way is it a bad pressing, because it's not. And in fact, it's kind of its own beast is how I describe it. So the 2012 vinyl release of this album, and by the way, I think this is made in Germany. It was pressed in Germany, I believe. Yes, it was. I have my old sticker on the record there. It says made in Germany. It's a fine listening experience. Very cool. If you can find this in the shops, I recommend picking it up because it's definitely cool. Now, let's talk about, and I think this is the mono remaster from 2014. It is. And this one is also very, very cool. These are getting harder and harder to find. They go for a lot of money on eBay, which is unfortunate, but the mono remaster is excellent and worth owning for sure, because finding an original UK mono Sgt. Pepper is very, very expensive, way more expensive than just finding this remaster from 2014. So I recommend picking that up if you can. Let's now talk about the Giles Martin remix of Sgt. Pepper. So this is released in 2017. I believe that's right, 2017. This happens to be the double album deluxe one, so you get like the bonus sessions record on here as well. But the original album, remixed and remastered by Giles Martin, I love it. I think it's really cool. I listen to it quite a lot. That being said, in my opinion, it's its own thing completely. It's different from the original stereo mix. And it's hard to compare the two just because they're such different beasts. First of all, this is a digital master, because he took all the original tracks from the original master tapes and put them into Pro Tools or whatever digital program they used, and then remixed it with all of the modern equipment. And that's fine, and that's great. And it's cool to listen to Sgt. Pepper in a modern way. This is, of course, you can never recreate this sorry, my mind went blank for a second. You can never recreate this because this was made in the studio with tape machines, with all those beautiful microphones, all that amazing 1960s mastering equipment, and in this case, mid-1970s mastering equipment. And you just can't duplicate that today at all. And so the Giles Martin mix, in my opinion, is its own thing. It's worth owning for sure. It's very, very cool to have. You hear a lot of things in the Giles Martin mix that you can't hear in this mix. That being said, you hear a lot of things in this original stereo mix and on this pressing that you can't hear in the Giles Martin remix. So really, in my opinion, if you want to have a complete Sgt. Pepper listening experience, you really need to own 3 Sgt. Peppers. You need to find an original UK pressing, like this one, of the original stereo mix. So you need to have this one. You need to have some type of version on vinyl of the original mono mix. And in this case, I have the 2014 mono remaster, which I think is excellent because the mono version of Pepper is definitely worth owning. And then I think it's also important to have the Giles Martin remix. So these 3 Peppers, if you have these 3, in my opinion, you've got everything you need to have when it comes to Sgt. Pepper. The original UK stereo mix, beautiful. It's definitely my go-to, my favorite of all the Sgt. Peppers, just because it's the original, and you can't really touch that. The mono mix, beautiful, love it, has its own beautiful attributes that I will be talking about when I make a mono Sgt. Pepper video, which will be soon. And then Giles Martin remix, great to have. It's its own thing, a whole new experience, a lot of fun. So, I just did a whole lot of talking about Sgt. Pepper. So, if you are in the market for Sgt. Pepper, this is the one that you want to pick up. So go to my website, needlemeetsvinyl.com. Check out this Sgt. Pepper. Check out all the records on the website. And as always, I thank all of you so much. All of you that continue to watch my videos. You all leave really, really nice, positive comments that really make me feel really good. They make me feel like I'm doing something that has value to you and it has value to me. And I just really appreciate all of the support within the vinyl community, the Beatles community, music lover community. I just really, really appreciate it. And I also appreciate all of you going through this transitional period with me where I talk about my website a whole lot. And I hope I don't talk about it too much. I try not to talk about the website every 5 seconds. I try to make most of these videos just about the music because that's what really matters. Of course, my website is a lot of fun for me, and it's a great little side project that I've got going on, but the music is what matters. This amazing masterpiece of an album by the Beatles is what matters. So, that's it for now, and we'll talk to you later. Bye for now.